I have a channel called Felix 501st. It technically is my main channel, and it deals a lot with Star Wars action figures. Recently, they announced a Haslab for the Star Wars Vintage Collection, and it is the Gunship. If you've seen some of my videos from that main, quote-unquote, main channel, now my side channel, sadly, the Gunship has been one of my holy grails. It is absolutely awesome. It is fantastic, and it is my favorite thing of all time. So much so that I managed to later pick up 2 other gunships. And when they announced that it was going to be the Gunship, I was excited, but I was nervous. Not necessarily because of anything to do with the Gunship, but more to do so with the discourse around the Gunship. And I know that this series is meant to be like a ranty discussion type of video. In that sense, it's more meant to just put out my own opinions on things. This is one of those videos where it's going to be more of a rant than a discussion. And I know it's probably not going to be the best video of all time, so I'm going to preface the disclaimer at the beginning of the video. This is just me putting out my frustrations with regards to the community. There's been a lot of discourse as to what a HasLab is supposed to be, in the sense that a lot of people want that same feeling when the Razor Crest and the Barge first came out. These were these larger-than-life vehicles where everybody was just really excited to get their hands on, very excited to back, very excited to just put into their display, because this was something that was going to be very, very difficult to find anywhere else. And that still is true with regards to just figures in general. A lot of people have been seeing the trend of rising cost being the biggest one, alongside just the quality and the quantity that you can get with regards to that price. And so when the Gunship was announced for $450, that was going to obviously be one of the first instances of people putting out their frustrations over. Is this worth $450, or could this be cheaper? And it's one of those things where I look at it and I go, it's not far from where it should be, but it probably could be cheaper, but not in the way that a lot of people are wanting it to be. There's a lot of people who are delusional in this community. I just want to say that right off the bat. And again, I know $450 is a lot of money, but you gotta remember that's $450 of plastic. A lot of small things, especially with like the amount of like details and parts to create this type of vehicle. We're not in 1990. We're not in the era where something like this can cost like $20, $50. This is 2025. This stuff is going to be expensive. With everything that's going on in the world, with the tariffs that are coming, they're finally starting to hit. A lot of companies are not willing to eat up that price. One of the examples is Nintendo. Twice they have risen their prices on a bunch of their accessories leading up to the brand new Nintendo Switch 2 before the product's even released. And then just a couple days ago they announced that everything's gonna go up again. It is insane, but it's only happening in certain places, and the US is going to be one of those places. Sony, same thing with their systems. Everything is going up in price. Things are costing more. So when you look at something like this, you can't really analyze it in comparison to some of the older vehicles. Now, that's not me justifying the price. $450 is pretty steep. I was thinking somewhere around the 300 range, maybe I'll grab 2. Because 300 is still a lot, but it was like in my mind, somewhere where I can more justify purchasing multiples of. $450 prices me out of multiple items and would just get me the one. It is one of those things where I look at it and I go, this is going to be a really, really tough thing to swallow, because it's $450. For $450, you can get a Switch 2. I know I keep, looking at my Switch 2 and saying you can get that instead of this, but that's really the case. There's a bunch of things that are going up on price. Magic the Gathering, I think a collector booster box, I think people were saying was like $100, something like that back in the day. Now it's like $600, $700, $800 for just plastic cardboard, like it's just cardboard, not even plastic. Pure cardboard is going for more than like these like really expensive items. This gunship is one of those things that does suck in terms of price, but it's understandable. In a couple months' time, we don't know what the prices are going to be. They're likely going to go up in price because, as you've seen across the entire industry, when prices go up, they will never go down. No matter how much people are saying, oh, it'll only be temporary. No, prices are not going down. We've seen this with the Black Series. We've seen this in the TVC. Over time, these figures have just gone more and more and more expensive. And it does limit the amount of things that Hasbro can do. Which brings me to another point. Well, no, I'll hold out on that point because that's the one I will rant on the most. One of the things that I think people are missing when it comes to the Republic gunship is that it is much bigger, I should say, than what you have if you have the Republic gunship. It's a nice gunship. It's just, it isn't to scale. And neither are the majority of the vehicles that we have. A lot of like big budget vehicles are very hard to put into scale because if you were actually to put these vehicles into scale on display at brick and mortar stores, they would just be too big, too expensive. They wouldn't move inventory and it would just sit there losing value. One of the easiest examples I can think of is that Black Series Snowspeeder that came with, I think it was DAC, I want to say, but it was a really, really, really cool Snowspeeder. And it sat and people saw it sitting in shelves. It didn't sell, but it was really good. And it killed vehicles for the Black Series. Recently, Hasbro is starting to like the Obiani Mustafar scene. They showcased the Bespin, like little landing pad, whatever you want to call it. And it's showing that they're willing to make this risk again, but you were not going to see a vehicle in a very long time, not at least to the quality of that Snowspeeder. Which brings me to the TVC. The TVC has a very, very good, I don't want to say track record, but like a healthy stance when it comes to vehicles. People want vehicles. It pairs very well with a lot of the figures that we get. A lot of people are looking into like 3D printing. A lot of people are looking into custom like fodder in terms of like foam designs or just like customization of their own vehicles and figures and things of that sort of nature. And it's really fun. It's really cool. But a lot of people take that stance into here where they're like, oh, I can just print my own gunship. And it's like, yeah, you can, but not everybody can. And if you were to be the only guy to do that for everybody, the price would be more than this. Not long ago, we had this display piece for the Black Series where it was the hallway and I think a couple of other things, and that was really expensive. I don't recall the price, but it was really expensive for what it was. But it showcases that stuff like that, at least in a mass production space, is really expensive and not really something that I think Hasbro are going to be willing to do. Recently, they have shown interest because people have showcased that they really want something like that. And that's perfectly fine. Again, I'm not trying to diminish the fact that stuff like this shouldn't happen. I think people on both sides have fumbled. I'm not trying to be like this, like, what's the new word that people are like putting out there? Like shulk or like shell or shill, I think it's what people are using nowadays in that community, where it's like, oh, you'll like everything that Hasbro does. And it's like, no, there's some things where I'm like, I don't really care for this. And a lot of it is subjective. A lot of people want certain things that maybe some other people don't like. I'm definitely one of those. I really don't care about the original trilogy. I have a lot of original trilogy characters. Matter of fact, if the original trilogy were to end today, I think the wide majority of people would still be satisfied. Obviously, people want more, but we have so many characters. When it comes to just the original trilogy, in comparison to like the prequel trilogy or the sequel trilogy, not that I really care about the sequel trilogy, but when it comes to some of these other eras, we don't really have that much. When it comes to the original trilogy, we have a lot. And yet they seem to be the vocal minority. I don't want to say vocal minority, but they seem to be the most vocal when it comes to the TVC. Whereas you can come to like the Black Series and it's kind of flipped. There's a lot of new people in the Black Series, so there's a lot more wants for newer media. Whereas with the TVC, there's still, like, despite people wanting new stuff, it's almost always dominated by some of the older stuff, the older figures, the older characters, the older vehicles, and that's perfectly fine. It gives you an idea and perspective as to what certain people want when it comes to the two different lines. Brings me back to, and I guess I have to talk about it, the vintage collection community. Holy shit, you guys are insufferable. Let me just break it down one by one. I already mentioned a couple things with regards to like cost and price and things of that sort of nature. Do I think it's $450? Not really. I think somewhere closer to $300, which is not realistic based on a multitude of things, and we'll get to it real quick. If it were like $400, I think it'd be a little bit more reasonable. $450 just seems a little high. I do want to mention one thing. When you buy the gunship, there is a surcharge. I think Hasbro has placed in like a standardized shipping costs across their website, where everything, I think it's that $6.99 price or $8.99 price or whatever the price is. And the surcharge is essentially the normal shipping rate that we have seen at all the other Haslabs. This isn't anything new. It's just that it looks like it's an additional charge when it really technically isn't, because there's no way you're going to ship this at that low of a price. It's just, I think it should have been combined. Anyways, I think $400 probably is a more reasonable thing, but the reason why it's $450 is because of how vocal people are at making sure people who are interested, or people who are excited, or people who want others to back it, how willing they are to antagonize some of these people. There's a lot of people in the community who are really excited for the gunship. I myself am included in that. And I have to say that because even though it's probably not the Haslab I necessarily would have wanted, it is a gunship. It is a bigger gunship. When you see it in person, I didn't see it in person, but I know for a fact, seeing a digital render and then seeing it in person, I have seen some of the other videos that Hasbro's made with regards to the gunship. It looks fantastic. Compare this to like a 2002 one. You are going to want this 100% of the time compared to the 2002. The 2002 is one mold that has been used several times over, just with a different paint deco. That's the only thing that has changed between the two. This is a now more accurate scale to the vintage collection 3¾ inch line with a lot more detail, a lot more functionality. Overall, a much better vehicle. And a lot of people are just angry about it because they want something else, because they're frustrated about the price, because they're frustrated about the direction that Hasbro has taken up, which is perfectly fine. The problem that I have with the community is that a lot of those people try to mask it, where they'll make a review and about a figure or a vehicle, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, but remember, and then they'll spend the next like 20 minutes of that like 25-minute video ranting about something that doesn't have to do with the figure. And it's very prevalent, and it has been for a very long time. I've mentioned a couple of times that I have left the figure community as a whole, and it's mainly because of the sort of discourse when it comes to stuff like this. It's very negative. It's very antagonistic. People are just hating for the sake of hate. It's become very popular to hate nowadays. Very popular to just say whatever you want and not really care about the consequences, because everything revolves around you and your wants and the little group of people that you have. Again, perfectly fine to have an opinion, perfectly fine to be like, I only like this little batch, can you make more? That's understandable, that's okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, with being critical about certain things. There are certain decisions that where it's like, you probably shouldn't have done that, or you could have done more with certain like figures not having full details, or with certain accessories missing or being damaged, or having different pricing issues and things of that sort of nature. I'm not saying any of that is wrong. It's more so you have to be mindful in the way that you do it, because a lot of people are just very quick to just be antagonistic, and it's just not healthy. It's not helping anyone. It's one of those things that is really infuriating to see. You can easily make it to where a lot of people can not only understand, like rally about the thing that you are on about in a positive, constructive way. That doesn't mean you have to like suck up and say like, oh, well, maybe I like it to be this price, maybe. No, like you can be critical. That's perfectly fine. It's more so the fact that people are just being negative to be negative. And one of those things that people are very negative about is that we should have had this like Sandcrawler thing. I think it's one of the most ridiculous things that people are absolutely hammering about, because in all honesty, a Sandcrawler is not a bad idea. I think it's actually kind of cool, but there's a lot of people who are so hell-bent on a Sandcrawler being the only thing that needs to exist. The argument that is constantly put out is that we never had a Sandcrawler. The Haslab is supposed to be this thing that like you never before seen vehicles, and this gunship is a farce. It's and it's like, buddy, we've had a Sandcrawler. We've had Sandcrawlers in the past. We've had a bunch of these vehicles that people are like, oh, I just want, a definitive version. Like, just say it's a definitive version. Don't act like this thing has never existed. Why are we getting a Haslab of something that's already existed? And then go onto like the Sandcrawler and say like, we've never had a Sandcrawler. Or no, that's not even the thing that they say. They say that we've had a Sandcrawler and it would be very nice to have a definitive edition of the Sandcrawler, an actual Sandcrawler. And it's like, that's the same argument. The most recent Sandcrawler was in the original trilogy line. I don't know what's called. It's not the Saga line. I think it's just called the original trilogy line. There's a lot of redundancy with these sorts of things. And I know I need to calm down. I know I need to be like very mindful in the way that I do this, because there's a lot of people who are like just frustrated. And I think I'm one of the very few individuals who are like very frustrated with the action figure community. Again, I don't want this to be a rant, but that's essentially what this is. You don't have to back this. You absolutely do not need to back the Republic Gunship at $450. If you think it's too pricey, that's absolutely perfectly fine to understand, because even I think it's a bit high. 400 would probably be better. 450 is a little bit hard to swallow. I would have loved to have grabbed multiples, but 450 is just not feasible for me, and so I'll probably just grab the one. I'm not going out and saying that you have to buy this, and if you don't buy this, you are somehow destroying the line. I think people are taking that out of proportion, saying that if this fails, then all Haslab fails, because look at how the Rancor happened. And it's like, well, it's not a one-to-one thing because they wanted a different thing. I think we will still have Haslabs because they've shown to be very, I don't want to say profitable, but they're very, I don't even want to say successful. They have been successfully backed a multitude of times. But there have been instances where just the discourse around it is very negative. And it's one of the most frustrating things when you come up and try to critique it, is that a lot of people are willing to just throw the criticism out and combine it with frustration for other things. And I'm not saying that a Sandcrawler is necessarily bad. I'm not saying that the price is too high. I'm not saying that it's not worth it. I'm not saying that it is worth it either. It's more so just that I'm frustrated with the way that people are handling Haslabs nowadays. One of the typical things that you would have seen in this community were channels just bashing everything, being frustrated, and then most of that frustration, I should say, was absolutely valid. But it became a reoccurring thing where you could hardly find a video, where you can hardly find a post, where you can hardly find a discussion that just didn't devolve into just yelling and blaming others and doing all these sorts of things. And there was a real era of where the action figure community was purely negative, just negative. No positivity inside, no matter how good the product was. But people are like, oh yeah, we just have to hate. And recently, there's been a new push away from that, to being critical, but being open to some of the other avenues when it comes to the action figure scene. Being able to do your own thing, being able to customize, being able to stay positive and showing some of your displays and showing how to help others get into the line and things of that sort of nature. And it's been beautiful, it's been wonderful, and it's exciting to see new faces come into the scene and just be positive, because a lot of the old faces, and I hate to say it, are just negative for the sake of being negative. And I understand, being in a bubble for so long, you start to like fully believe that's what everybody thinks, and that's just not the case. I've seen a lot of channels that I've watched over the years just fall to this negative like side. And a lot of them are the first channels that you see when you are trying to get into the action figure scene. And it's not bad, and I'm not trying to name names or be critical of them. It's one of those things where it's just this frustration that's been with me for like a very long time. It's one of the reasons why I quit my main channel, Felix 501st, in case you want to check it out. But it's one of those things that I really wanted to do that for a very long time. I felt at home in that community. When I got into YouTube, just like subscribing and watching as a kid, were these like figure channels, and they were all very just fun and engaging, and they weren't necessarily hateful to be hateful. It was one of those things where they were just being passionate about the things that they were passionate about. And over time, that has changed. It's just people being negative for the sake of being negative. And it's not fun when you have something as exciting as the Gunship, where you know that the discourse is not going to be about critical things that do need actual criticisms on. It's just going to be an influx of people trying to put out their own negativity out there just because they don't like the thing. It's one of the reasons why I even thought of this series came from the HasLab. Not necessarily this one, but the old one, the Cantina. And it's like, that was supposed to be the holy grail for all of original trilogy people, was a Mos Eisley Cantina. And it was hardback. There weren't as many people that were interested in that sort of thing, that everybody's like, oh, this is gonna sell hotcakes, it's gonna be the greatest thing of all time, everybody rejoice. And when it started struggling, eventually it just became like, oh, it's just too expensive, oh, I can edit this on my own, oh, it's this and that, and it just became a very, very negative space. And when it failed to get that third tier, because it's still back, but it took a while, but when it failed to get that third tier, I loved the irony of later on, I think, they did a like tournament style, I think it's the March Madness like TVC tournament style thing, where that third figure won. It's like, you're not getting it. You failed to get it here at the Mos Eisley set. And I'm not saying that, you know, we should never get it. I'm not saying that, but it was very hilarious for people to be like, oh yeah, now absolutely that this is one that this poll, this fan poll, it's going to be made and it has to be made. And if it's not made, then this whole thing is it's like, that's not what this thing is. It's supposed to be this fun, passionate thing. It's plastic for children. You just haven't grown up. We've evolved it into this like collector type thing, but it's a figure line for kids that's disguised as this adult thing now. I've collected the animated line. That's the line that I love the most. I loved collecting those figures. They have been my favorite figures to collect. Honestly, there are ways to lower the price. There are ways to lower a bunch of these things, but that would mean sacrificing what makes quote-unquote TVC, because I know that there's certain things that TVC people want, and I know that that's one of the reasons why the costs are high, and it's perfectly fine. If you desire it, you desire it. It's one of those things where I fell into the hole as well. I could be critical about the Gunship. I sort of was critical about the Gunship, but all in all, I missed the point. The point was the Gunship, and ultimately I ended up doing something else. I ended up ranting about the community. Whereas most people rant about Hasbro, I just ranted about the community. You're going to see a lot of these videos that are going to do the exact same thing, where they're not going to talk about the Gunship a lot. They're just going to talk about their own frustrations. And I think most of it is valid. I don't have the Felix 501st channel anymore. It's dead, it's gone. You're not gonna see more content on there. I would love to make more content when it revolves around the action figure community, because it's something I still collect. I still have this bookshelf over here. It contains Black Series figures and TVC figures. And there's also other figures from the Marvel Legends community. I collect video games, action figures, I collect a multitude of things. My Ghost in Millennium Falcon over there, I recently picked up the Lego Gunship, what's it called? Collector Series Gunship, which is actually closer to scale. Like if you have a Lego Gunship or have seen it in person, it's more or less, I think, a little bit smaller than what the actual Gunship is supposed to be. I might be wrong with that, but it's supposed to give you it is bigger, and this will be even better. It's one of those things where I've seen it a multitude of communities. This is not only prevalent in the Star Wars community. This is prevalent in a bunch of communities where people are complaining about prices. The companies maybe are not making the best decisions when it comes to determining some of the prices for the new products that they release. The video game industry has been suffering heavily with this. Marvel Legends has also seen this. The Magic the Gathering stuff. Final Fantasy. The only reason I got into Magic the Gathering was because they released their Final Fantasy set. And throughout that entire thing, not a single video was positive about the Final Fantasy set. Even after it was released, everybody was very negative. I love Final Fantasy, and I was just trying my absolute best to find people who were somewhat excited for like maybe the content itself, but the majority of it was these larger creators who were in the space complaining and complaining and complaining, and it made it very hard to just like want to explore some of these other sets. Like, what makes, you know, some of these like fan favorite sets fan favorite? Instead, it's like everybody's just negative, so I guess I'll just stick with the things that I have, and that's absolutely what I'll do with the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering set. I have absolutely no intention of going to like these collector events and stuff like that, and I know I'm in the minority because I'm a newcomer, but it absolutely gave me a good, fresh perspective of how communities work. When you're already in it, and I moved the thing by accident, but when you're already in it, these like complaints are already commonplace. But when a newcomer comes in, it seems to be just negativity all around. And it's not that most of it isn't justified. A lot of it is. But in the manner in which it is discussed, it's very difficult for a newcomer to be like, this is a good community to bring others into. And that's what the line needs, because it's just the old heads. And I hate to say that, but it essentially is. The only ones who are keeping like the quote unquote line alive. And even then, it's not necessarily the best things that they desire. Because once you're in the community for a very long time, your ideas as to what you want from the community sort of gets warped. It's not one of those things where every decision that you're making is for the benefit of the line itself. It's more so for the benefit of your collection, which is fine, it's understandable. But that's not the whole community, that's not the whole population. There's a whole bunch of individuals who are interested in something like this. People who say that you just grab an old Republic gunship. I can say the exact same thing for the Sandcrawler. I can say the exact same thing for the Luke X-Wing. I can say the exact same thing for the brand new Darth Vader TIE Advance. Just grab the older model. But what's the one thing that every collector says? We need a brand new, fully tooled from the ground up figure or vehicle that becomes the most definitive version of all time. And yet when we get those, I remember seeing a video not that long ago where, and my cat is like complaining at me. I don't think the guy makes videos anymore, but there was this old video where the guy ranted about this figure and saying that it needed brand new things. It needed a whole new thing. It was an old trilogy character, that's all I remember. But essentially they were complaining, saying, oh yeah, we need this from the ground up, we need a brand new one, and do it of this specific scene or movie or whatever. And then a couple months go by and they released that exact same thing that he desired. Like, he asked for this figure, he asked for this brand new figure from this specific scene. And the first thing that he said when he got to it was that this is the worst thing he's ever seen, and that it's not worth a dime, and that the old one's better, and that and I remember sitting there and being like, wait, didn't you just complain that you wanted this, that you weren't happy with the older one? This is that and more, and not even at like the price jump at that time, the current price. And it made me realize that, hey, there's a lot of people who maybe don't actually care about this hobby, who are not actually passionate about the hobby, who are just there to make noise, who are there to hate just to hate. And I recognize that probably at a good time in my life, because I then took the time to go away from all that. I collected on my own. I sold a lot of the things I didn't really like, and I stopped listening to the discourse, and I felt happy. I got the vehicles I want. I got the figures I want. The figures I didn't care for, I didn't care for. And I felt so much happier doing that sort of thing. So much so that I got into other lines, just expanding my hobbies. Where this was the only hobby that I really had as a kid, I now have a bunch of stuff. Whereas if this were to die, it would be a very genuine, sad thing to see die. I'm in a healthy enough spot where I can just look elsewhere and not feel fully destroyed. And I think a lot of people need that. If you're unhappy with the line, you don't need to collect it. If you're unhappy with the vehicle, you don't need to back it. You don't. It's a wonderful thing. You don't need to back it. You don't need to buy it. It's just one of those things where most of the discourse is not going to be there. And again, this is a rant, so I'm gonna once again point you to the disclaimer at the beginning. It's tough being a collector, and it's not going to go away. I'm not trying to delude yourself into thinking that this video is going to end all of this. But I think there genuinely needs to be a discussion amongst the bigger channels, which is that we need to revise the manner in which we discuss these sorts of things. Not be sucking up to the company. I'm not saying that. And there are channels who are like, who have complained a multitude about like the products that Hasbro puts out, and then when they get into their own stores or in their own businesses or their own like lines, when they start producing their own like accessories and stuff like that, they take a step back and then go, oh, I didn't realize this. This is actually quite expensive. Not maybe in the sense that everything that Hasbro's doing gets justified, because there's still a Disney tax, a Star Wars tax, and a bunch of other taxes. But understanding that, hey, this isn't as like absurd as when I wasn't in like the business side of things. But it's ultimately your decision and your money that decides whether or not this is worthwhile. And so I leave you with that. I'm backing the Gunship, just the one, because I can't afford anything else. I would love for you to back it. And yeah, with all things considered, I hope you genuinely have a good day. I hope if you like the figure, if you like the vehicle, you know, give it a back. I think it'd be pretty cool. There's a lot of things I didn't touch up on, but again, this is more of a rant, and I do apologize. This has been a video that I've always wanted to make since the death of my main channel. And with the series, I sadly get to make it. And I don't think it's really in good taste either, but we'll see how everything goes on about. Stay positive, stay passionate. Back the Gunship, you know.